textbooks way of thinking about something like emotions. So I want to start with this. And just kind of lock this into your brain. What we're going to talk about right now is feeling, being, and showing. And the way I want to describe this thing is this is emotion or affect and its impact on how we are being. In other words, how we are presenting in given moments and what's coming out in terms of our character. And then the showing piece is what then gets exhibited. What do other people see as a result of what we're feeling, how we're being, how we're showing up, and what are we showing to other people? Okay, so this is the fundamentals I want to talk about. And I'm going to throw out a question that's hard to answer, but just to kind of get your brain warmed up, is this: what are you feeling right now? And how is it what you're feeling impacted how you're showing up and what you're showing to others? And I don't expect you to answer it yet, but we're gonna dig into this for just a second. So I was feeling a lot on Sunday. Some of you who know me well would know this, that I have a son who's going to college. And Sunday morning I wake up and I was feeling just overwhelmed. So Thursday we actually move him in, this Thursday. And I had this kind of overwhelming sense of emotion that I have not had. I didn't have it at graduation. Graduation was virtual. It was all these things. And I realized, even when I realized he's leaving my home. Now, some of you who've been through this are going like, he's not leaving your home. He's going to be back. So that's all you rational people want to put in a rational box. But the reality is that he's leaving my home. And so no matter how long it lasts, and he may be back tomorrow, this is something that's happening. So I was quite literally, I was overwhelmed. I was like starting to sob, but not making any whimpering sounds, but I was starting to cry. And I'm like, I literally at one point went into the bathroom and I thought, I don't know if I want him to see this. And so now I'm in the bathroom going like, I don't know what the right decision is right now. I don't know, in terms of my presence and impact on him. I thought, so part of it is like, be vulnerable. Like that's everybody says this, right? But I think there's a choice to make, because I'm also thinking, I don't want him to be afraid. I don't want him to think and so whether it's, rational or not, like all these things are happening. So I was feeling sad, happy, full. I was feeling underprepared, overwhelmed. I was thinking to myself, like, have I done my job? He's leaving my home. Have I done my job? And so I'm dealing with all this. And then it was interesting because the question of do I share it with him came up. Do I share it with the rest of my family? Do I just let it all out? Because I was like on the verge of just emotional sort of coming out. The other question was do I share it with others? And so I was trying to think about who might support me in this moment. And I'll tell you what I knew I did not want. I did not want to send a text to anyone in my network who would say this: you've done a great job, Rob. That would have felt so empty, or just sort of answered all my emotional questions. And I did not want that. And I also didn't want someone who goes who kind of just minimized it into oh, it's normal, everybody goes through it. I didn't want that either, but I needed someone who I know, live in this moment. I was looking for that. I can tell you what I was looking for. And so it was an interesting moment because all these things about what I was feeling were then calling into question, what do I do now? And it was interesting too, because I made a decision, and when I was trying to make a decision about those emotions I was feeling, is I chose to be with him. So what I did is I went yesterday to go help him buy jeans at the mall. And then we played Call of Duty for a while together. And then we watched the third John Wick installment. And so I don't know if you were you watched that. Some of you were like, that's awesome. And some of you were like, that was really violent, Rob. So anyway, whatever it was, we had a bonding moment. Let it be what it is. But let's dig deeper into all these things that I was experiencing that I bet you are relating to what I was talking about there. So I'm going to go, every week, give myself permission to get in a little bit deeper into what's going on with emotions and affect, what we understand. Listen to this. So for a long, long, long time, the whole area of emotions and what's often described as affect was driven by Freudian theory. Okay, live with me for just a second. And what it was about was normalizing anxiety and coping with stress through conscious and unconscious mechanisms. And it's interesting. It was about identifying anxiety to determine motivation. And here's what's interesting. The approach with a person in terms of anxiety, so think about this, was this. It was to repress anxiety and feeling. So the idea was that anxiety and negative outcomes or negative emotions should be repressed. We should put it away. Now, I'm not saying there isn't truth to that, because anytime you read Freud stuff, it's like there's always going to be some truth to it, right? But I think it's important to note that a lot of our entire therapeutic, and I would say even our entire culture, was focused on repression. It's also a period in history where there was a lot of focus on pathology as kind of the main psychological way we approach things. So let's find out what's wrong with us and fix it. Now imagine how that affected organizational life as well. Now here's the problem with that approach. That approach, without dealing with the tension of the other side, is that it limits our capacity to see potential in the situation. And if you connect the different parts of the complexity of developing a leader, we know that it's not just the championships in terms of a leader's experience that shape them in profound ways. It's also the crucibles. So not dealing with the feelings about those crucible moments is just quite literally putting aside the possibility, the potential that opens up there. I'm not going to deal with this now, but it's one of the reasons with the toolkit that the issue of purpose gets revisited and revisited, because we did a study on emotional regulation, and one of the key drivers was purpose, which I'll come back to in the end. I know this is a lot of content, you all, but I just want to give you a bunch of stuff to dig into, and then we're going to talk about it for you. Listen to this. So one other concept around regulation is described this way. All of it's emotional self-regulation, or making choices about what we're going to feel. It's all of the conscious and non-conscious strategies we use to increase, maintain, or decrease one or more components of an emotional response. That's what regulation is about. Like, what we're talking about is all of the conscious, the things we know and the thing we don't know, those strategies that we use to kind of affect how we're going to show up. Everything I'm drawing on to make a decision about how I'm going to talk to my kid. He's not really a kid, he's 19, but I'll always see him as a kid, right? I'm looking at Ron White going, Ron's like, I get you. So here's the deal. Point number one was this, kind of thinking about the way folks now think about this. Here's the deal. Emotions are neither good or bad. And the interesting thing about the Freudian approach, and I'm not saying it's all wrong, but I'm saying about dealing with the tension on the other side, is that emotional regulation is both about, probably in certain moments, about tuning out or tuning in. It's about a choice. So anyone that goes like, all that stuff is broken, now we should just all get in touch with all of our emotions, I say that's crap, because it's not dealing with the reality is that it's both sides. There are times when tuning out may be good, but my first point is that it's a choice. It's a choice we're making is what it's important. And so let's go a little further. That's point number one, is that emotional regulation is about a choice between tuning out or tuning in. So it's interesting because I wrote at the bottom here, in essence, emotions are things to grab onto or to let go of. Woo! I love that. Sorry. So here we go. I know tomorrow, it's tough. So here's the next thing about emotions. There's been some interesting research on context, on organizations in context. You know what, y'all? Like, there's a whole book written about it, like emotions in the workplace. Like, this is, don't go buy that book. It's really expensive and it's too big. It's like, I'll just read these cliff notes. But here's what's interesting about that. Listen to this. I even blew Dr. Halleck's brain this morning, I think. I'm trying to right now. It was interesting when in the organizational literature, they differentiate between moods and emotion. Do you know the difference between moods and emotions? Listen to this. Moods are generalized feelings not identified with a particular stimulus or context, by the way, and not sufficiently intense enough to interrupt ongoing thought processes. Two things. Moods, not connected to anything specific, and not intense enough to change anything. Okay? That's a mood. I'm in a bad mood. So if you're really in a bad mood, not connected to anything right specific, and it's not intense enough to actually make a difference. Emotions are normally associated with particular events and aren't, of course, intense enough to disrupt thought processes. That's what differentiates them. So we're talking about emotions. We're talking about things, feelings you have that are intense enough to possibly change something. possibly give us a choice about how we're going to show up. So that's the second piece. That's a whole piece of just my organizations in context. I'm not going to go deep into this, but point number 3 is that, did you know this, that there's a lot of interesting research around the relationship between emotions and personality, emotions and temperament or traits. And what is fascinating with some of this research, I'm not going to make big claims about this, but what's interesting, and actually Daniel talks about this in very sophisticated ways because it's an area he knows a lot about, but is that, did you know that your neuroticism could be affected by your emotions about specific contexts? I'm not saying that you don't have sort of a baseline, like, even, by the way, the researchers say even your extroversion could be. So I'm not saying you don't have a baseline, for example, on introversion and extroversion, but that personality trait, when it comes into contact with our emotions and context, can move. It can open up more extroversion. It's kind of interesting to think about that. So that's all I'm going to say about that. The fourth thing is this, is that leader affect has been shown to impact us. What we feel tends to get passed around. And in organizations, it gets affected by things like physical surroundings, work group characteristics, like just the people I'm around. And also just the context of the organization that I'm in can actually affect how I feel about myself, which is why we talk about this, like related to, are you feeling that certain organizations will make you feel a certain way, and to give people permission to that possibility that that's true. So here's what I want to do, is to bring this full circle, to give you some of those handholds, and then come back to this. So here's what's interesting. Feeling, affect, and emotions, okay? Being, this is how this is page 10, by the way, of your feedback report. It's a listing of things, your feelings about certain words that you then assess, and it's in order of magnitude. You look at those words, and it's amazing as you look at that page 10 in your feedback report, what it tells you about what you're feeling right now, or at the moment when you responded in the wild profile, and that feeling is affecting how you're showing up. And so I described, these are those character dimensions that are on page 9 at the top of the page, that your feelings are affecting things like courage. It's crazy that it's actually pushing up and providing more courage, or more courage to be vulnerable. If you look at the things on that list, or hopefulness, and we're being more realistic. And here's the other deal. Then look at the bottom of page 9. Those are a lot of really cool things to have in this, things that people would see. But imagine how those feelings then impact what your character is kind of presenting as, and then what people are seeing and feeling from you. And here's what's fascinating. I'm not gonna dumb down the literature, y'all, because, and know this, like, this is important to note, there is not clarity on whether emotions impact this way, or whether the things that we're expressing impact emotions or behavior, by the way. In some cases, what we do or what we feel impacts what other people see. In some other cases, when people see something from us and we experience that, it impacts how we feel. You can't oversimplify it as one way or the other. The research doesn't support it. And this is what is so powerful. I gotta finish with this, then Daniel, everybody go talk about this. Like, talk about your own feedback report, is this. I think of feelings, these emotions, this affect, as in many ways, and this is gonna oversimplify it, but it's like a plant, and this is the soil in which you are sitting right now. This is the emotional soil in which you are sitting right now. At the very top of this is what the tree is producing. Here's what's fascinating. Sometimes it's about tilling the soil, and sometimes it's about pruning the tree. That actual pruning could impact the way that we're growing. My wife plants, we have succulents all over our patio that she loves. And I was like, how much do you water those things? Yesterday I asked her this, and she goes, not too much. It's like interesting, like there's this weird, and then she loves to prune. And it's so weird to cut healthy branches off, because sometimes what we prune is actually good things. It's kind of weird, and sometimes it's things that are not so good. So with that, you have all this data, like so go to page 10, and then walk backward into the top of page 9, and then go to the bottom of page 9 as a way to kind of tell this emotional story about, at these 3 levels of feeling, being, and showing. So let's jump into a conversation about our feedback reports.
So we'll move through our process of thoughtful action. We started with awareness in our first conversation. What's something that you